This is an enormous wing. Those are aero holes in the rear. And there are some more on the hood. And look, a massive air intake at the front. And on the nose, a Lotus badge. A Lotus badge on a very familiar shape. An Evora. Again. And from some corners of the world, I can hear eyes rolling. Because we've seen special Lotus Evoras before, and special Elises. In fact, really, that's all we've seen over the last few years. And once again, this GT430 is the fastest car Lotus has ever built, the most powerful, etc, etc. It's also a little bit more expensive than you'd expect a Lotus to be, but like a little beam of light coming through a crack in a cave wall when you're really lost underground, I know it happens to a lot of people, this is hope. Thing is, all the special cars that have come before have added something into the mix. Be it a bit more power, more downforce, they've made something already very good even better. Yet because it's not a shiny new shell or whatever, it's easy to simply brush it all over as a bit naff. So what makes this one so special then? Well, aside from the 3.5 litre supercharged V6 with 430 horsepower and 332 pound-foot, and considering that's in a car that weighs just 1,258 kilos, well, that's a lot of power in not much weight. It's got a fair bit of shut. Well, because this is the full-fat GT430, it's got a big wing on the back and a splitter at the front, which means it generates 250 kilos of downforce, so you can go around corners very, very quickly indeed. There are also vents in the bonnet to relieve pressure from the wheel arches. Vents in the rear allow air to flow from the rear wheel wells. Vents in the grille to push air through the body of the car and over the front wheels. Its chassis is based on the Evora GT4 race car, so it's strong and has legit race pedigree. Oh, and to help with the old handling, there's a set of adjustable dampers, so you can tune it to your heart's content. The GT430 Sport is sort of a 911 GT3 MIT touring pack. It loses the wing and some of the silliness, but it keeps the power. So it'll still do 0 to 62 in silly speed, but it's actually a second slower around Lotus's test track than the full fat one we've got here. That said, in the more sensible trim, it's 100 kilos-ish lighter than an Evora 400. Now when you consider that an average American weighs, say, 80 kilos, that's a lot of weight gone. The weight loss is explained by carbon fibre all over the place. In some places you can see it, like the boot cover. In others, like the front and rear bodywork, you can't. But it's there, and it gives this thing a hell of a boost. It's also likely the last Evora with a big number after its name. You see, speaking with Lotus's big boss, Jean-Marc Gales, he compared the Evora 410 and 400 to the Carrera and Carrera S 911s, and this to the GT3. That's what it's gunning for. To go any further would require a step change, he said. They'd have to start looking at McLaren. Maybe one day, but not now. Lotus's direction of late has been less about the classic lines of the old Europas, Elans and even Elises. It's more aggression, performance and anger. And it's easy to see how it got there. With previously limited resource, it's had to rely on its engineers and its racers to find out how to make the most out of what they have. Performance-wise, it is up there. 3.6 to 60 is not much time. Speed-wise, this one will do 190. The one without the aero will do 196. That is not slow. The steering is beautiful. Just the way you can place the car, the feedback you get through it, the movement, just a little bit of movement, you can tell exactly what the car's doing. The AP Racing brakes are phenomenally good. You get so much feel from them. You can modulate them delicately and lightly. Twin that with the steering, that's all good, but then you got the gearbox. You feel the gate, you feel what you're doing, and that adds so much to the experience. Oh, lovely manual gearbox. Now, interestingly, this will come with an auto, and that gets a little bit more torque, but why on earth you would want an automatic one of these, I do not know. Now, there's a few driving modes to choose from. There's normal, which looks after you, it's not very noisy. Sport, which livens things up a little bit, and then there's race. What race does is it lowers the traction control's grasp on you a little bit, makes it a touch noisier, and makes everything a little bit more exciting. But there's something else on top of that. See, if you press and hold the race button, it turns the traction control off in degrees, so you go from 1 to 5, and that gives you a little bit more slip than you would otherwise allow, and then a lot more slip and a lot more slip up to, well, enough angle to, if you're not expecting it, clench a little bit. There's one thing that is very hard to get past. No matter how well it drives, the GT430 is still £112,500 before options. That's deep into Porsche territory, and I'll wager I know which way most people would go. For that money, you expect digital climate control, an in-house sat-nav and things like that, and you just don't get that here. But then you think about where the money has gone in this car. It's gone into the engineering, it's gone into the parts, it's gone into making it drive the best it can drive. So what you want about Lotus, about the Evora, about the many derivations thereof, about previous company situations. The GT430 is easily one of the most impressive driver's cars out there. It flatters, it handles beautifully, it sounds incredible, and you know what? Puts a big grin on your face.